Measurement lesson number 5, conversions within the imperial system. As we looked before, we noticed that the imperial system is not as nice in some ways as the metric system because it's not always tens that we're multiplying or dividing by. So we're going to practice a new technique called dimensional analysis. This technique is used a lot in more advanced level courses. For instance, if you ever end up taking physics, or if you go into the nursing program, you'll also use dimensional analysis a lot because it works for doing more than one type of conversion. At first, it might seem difficult, or even if not difficult, it might seem awkward, but practice the method and learn it so that you can use it with the more challenging and difficult questions that we end up coming up with. The process of dimensional analysis is based on multiplying fractions, and there's 2 points in multiplying fractions that we use, and one is that any numerator can be simplified with any denominator, and we multiply the numerators, we multiply the denominators, and then we simplify if we're able to. So I just have a quick fraction multiplying question here, and we can multiply this fraction quite quickly if we think about this simplifying piece first. And this only is true for multiplying fractions, but any numerator can be simplified with any denominator. So for instance, I have a 3 in the numerator here, and a 3 in the denominator here. Well, 3 divided by 3 is 1, so those simplify out. Sometimes we say they cancel out. Notice that I have a 2 in the numerator and a 2 in the denominator as well. Those simplify out. Then I take what's left and I multiply across the numerators, so I really only have 1 left in my numerators. And in my denominators, I have 5 left. If I had other numbers that did not cancel out, I would just multiply across the top, I would multiply across the bottom for the denominators, and then I would have some number over some number, and if I needed to, I would simplify, or if I wanted it as a decimal answer, I would use a calculator and divide. So 1/5, remember, is the same as 1 divided by 5. So keep those 2 things in mind as we do this type of conversion. I want to convert 3 weeks to minutes. So I'm finding out how many minutes there are in 3 weeks. The way I can do that is using the conversions on this chart. I can go from weeks, while weeks converts to days, and I can see that days convert to hours, hours convert to minutes, and minutes convert to seconds. If you think about it, I'm looking at this line and this one and then this one and then this one. So what I start with then will be weeks, and I'm just going to write the units down. I'm not even going to write the numbers down for this next step. Weeks, and then I'm always going to multiply, and then I want to turn them into days. So what I'm going to multiply by is days per week. And notice that now I have a week in the numerator and a week in the denominator, so those are going to cancel out. And then I'm not satisfied with days, so I'm going to multiply by how many hours there are per day. And notice now I have days in the numerator and the denominator, so they're going to cancel out. But hours is not what I want yet either, so I'm going to multiply by the number of minutes per hour, and then because I want seconds, I'm going to multiply by the number of seconds per minute. So now let's put this into add the numbers. I'm going to just scroll up a little bit here to give myself a bit of space. So I'm starting with 3 weeks. I'm going to multiply by days per week. I go to the equation and I see that 7 days goes with 1 week, so that's going to be times 7/1. hours per day, I go to the equation that compares hours and days, and it's 24 per 1. Oops, 24, not 21. And I'm multiplying by minutes per hour, so that's 60 over 1. And I'm multiplying by seconds per minute, which is 60 over 1. So notice that my weeks canceled with weeks, days canceled with days, hours canceled with hours, minutes canceled with minutes, and I was just left with seconds. So this now, once I multiply all my numerators together, because my denominators all happen to be 1, and every once in a while you're going to have a question like that, that makes it super simple. We're just going to go 3 times 7 times 24 times 60 times 60, and I have to double check that I did that correctly with my own calculator a second. 3 times 7 times 24 times 60 times 60 equals a very big number, 1 million. I think that's too big of a number. Let me just double check that. 3 times 7 times 24 times 60 times 60 equals 1,814,400 seconds. And again, I didn't fit it in there right beside, but make sure you include your units, okay? So this week canceled with the weeks that were here. I'm not putting the words in the third line. I'm really only going to put the numbers in the third line of the solution, okay? So the 3 steps to these solutions. The first one is to decide what the units are that you're going to travel through to get to your solution. So you're going to go from, in this example, weeks to days to hours to minutes. And then decide what it is that you're going to multiply by each time so that your units cancel out, so that the only word not crossed off is the unit you want for your final answer, so the seconds in this case. And then put in the numbers. So you were started with 3 weeks, and put in the numbers for each of these, and the numbers will always be the numbers from your equations, and then multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and divide if you need to. So we'll do a couple more examples like just to practice. So now I'm going the opposite way. I've got 777,000 seconds, and I want to change that into days. So if I look at the chart, seconds only go to minutes. So I have to go from seconds to minutes. Minutes go to hours, and hours go to days. Okay, so that's the units that I'm going to go through. So I'm going to start with my seconds. I'm going to multiply by minutes per second because I want to get rid of the seconds. The beginning is in the numerator. I want it in the denominator in the second one so that they cancel out. Times hours per minute times days per hour. And then the hours will cancel out, and I'll be left with my answer because now I'm only left with days. Okay, so let's put the numbers in. I'm starting with 777,600. I'm multiplying by, now be careful here because in the last question we had 60 over 1, but notice in the equation 1 minute equals 60 seconds, so I'm multiplying by 1 over 60. And then we're multiplying by hours per minute. 1 hour is 60 minutes, so it's 1 over 60 times, and then days per hour, 1 day for 24 hours, okay? if you're not sure what to do with your first number, whether it's a numerator or denominator, just put it over a 1. So now when I multiply my numerators, I've got 777,600 times 1 times 1 times 1, which gives me 777,600. And when I multiply 1 times 60 times 60 times 24, I get 86,400. And when I divide those two numbers, I get 9 days. And I'm writing my units down to be clear about what the units are for my final answer. Let's go on to the next example. And I've got some length, liquid capacity or volume charts and weight charts, and we're going to practice with using those as well. So for example 3, I'm converting 21 yards to inches. If I look on the chart for yards, I see that yards go to feet, and then just above that, I see that feet go to inches. So I'm going to go yards to feet to inches. So that means I'm going to take my yards, I'm going to multiply by the number of feet per yard, and then I'm going to multiply by the number of inches per foot. Okay, my yards cancel out, my feet cancel out, and I'm going to be left with inches as my answer. So I'm starting with 21 yards times 3 feet per yard times 12 inches per foot equals, multiply my numerators, which gives me 756. My denominators are all 1, so it's just 756 over 1, or 756 inches. Example 4. Oh, I want to see the chart if I can at the same time. There. Example 1, 70,400 ounces to tons. Okay, so I can see that ounces go to pounds and that pounds go with tons in those two top right-hand equations. So I'm going to go from ounces, which is OZ is the short form for ounces. I'm going to go to pounds, LB is a short form for pound, and to tons. Okay, so I'm going to do ounces times pounds per ounce times tons per pound, and after I cancel out all my numerators and denominators, it's going to give me tons as my answer. And now I really do have to scroll down. So I'm starting with 70,400 ounces, and I'm going to multiply by pounds per ounce. So 1 pound is 16 ounces, times tons per pound, 1 ton is 2,000 pounds. So I've got 70,400 in the numerator when I multiply, and my denominator, and I used a calculator to do this, although I probably could have done it without, 32,000. And so on the calculator, I'll do 70,400 divided by 32,000, and I get 2.2 tons. Okay, and let's do one more example lesson where I'm going from fluid ounces to quarts. So I'm using the liquid capacity or volume chart for this one. And if you look at the chart, you can see that fluid ounces, that's FL, and then OZ goes to pints, PT, which goes to quarts, QT. So I'm going to start with my fluid ounces. I'm going to multiply by pints per fluid ounce. And then I'm going to multiply by quarts per pint. Notice that the hardest part really is this first line where we're deciding what are the units. So always write down the units you're starting with and look at your chart to see what that can be converted to. Sometimes you have to make a choice. Sometimes there'll be two choices of which direction to go in. But think of the direction of where you want to get to. So sometimes it helps to start at the beginning with the ounces and at the end with the quarts, and notice that they both go to pint. So we can use pint as our middle step. Okay, so now we'll fill in our numbers. Once we have that first line done, then the second line is really, we're changing those arrows to multiplication, and we're always going to multiply by the next step divided by the previous one, the one that we want to have canceled out, so that at the end we are left with quarts or whatever our desired unit is. So I'm starting with 290. I'm multiplying by 1/20, and I'm multiplying by 1/2 because 1 quart is 2 pints in the equation. So when I multiply my numerators, I get 290. When I multiply my denominators, I get 40. And when I divide with my calculator, I get 7.25 quarts. And that's the end of this lesson on imperial measurement conversions.